Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Energy Newsbeat podcast. My name's Stu Turley, President and CEO of the Sandstone Group, but I've also got David Blackmon on this joint podcast. He is the podcast host with Energy Impacts. David, how are you today?
I am thrilled to be here, man. Just doing great. It's a beautiful day in Texas.
I'll tell you what, but we've got a special guest, one of my all-time favorite guys that I follow on X all the time. We've got Josh Young with Bison Interests. He's got a hell of a Substack. How are you, Josh Young?
Stu, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
I'll tell you what, we are so excited to have you here. Let me just, what do you got going on over there at Bison Interests? Because you've got a hell of a Substack rolling.
Thank you. Yeah, sure. So here, let's see. What I was trying to do is figure out how to share this. Here we go. Okay, I found it. Perfect. Just give me 1 second while I share this.
We're all trying to get our social media stuff together here, folks. Bear with us. By the way, I want to thank Josh for coming on because he lowers the average age of our panel today by about 15 years. So thank you for being here.
And he's got a hell of a hairline. But let's just go on to his Substack here. I love Bison Interests. I'll tell you what, it is your insights on X. I thoroughly enjoy following you on X and picking on you when I see you on other, any other interviews going on, because I respect your opinion. So
thanks. Yeah. So I don't know if people know, but Stu used to be with Entercom, right? Way back then. Yeah, so Stu used to, back before we launched Bison Interests, which is the investment firm that I now run, I co-founded in 2015. Even before that, Stu used to I was with a family office and I ran a small long-short hedge fund where my big takeaway was to not short stocks. Stu used to bring these management teams to meet with me. Typically, we were mostly on sort of the breakfast circuit. So he'd bring by teams to come have breakfast, occasionally lunch, or occasionally in office meetings. And Stu is such a good sport because my style is generally it's very inquisitive. And so I would just ask people lots of questions, and sometimes they would take it badly because they thought I was negative about them, but truly it was just, hey, if I could ask a management team 20 questions and they had good answers for all 20, they were probably a fraud. But if they had good answers for about 15, and they, stumbled a little bit and whatever, it was great. Stu brought me some of the best and worst investment ideas I've ever had. And so, it's such a pleasure seeing you guys work together. David, it's been great to get to know you over the years, but Stu, there's just this very long history that we have from, the dark ages pre-oil crash of 2014. So it's such a pleasure to be on here. Happy to talk about Bison, but I just really want to, I don't know if people understand just how deep Stu's connections are to the oil and gas industry and how far back they go, regardless of sort of appearance of age or whatever. There's something that just decades of, dealing with these cycles and the people and the narratives, there's just so much value in that I wanted to highlight. And I have so much time for you guys. I really appreciate what you do, and I'm thrilled to be back on.
Well, I love that line. In fact, that's going to probably be the title of the podcast as I get this issued out on Apple and Spotify is Stu brings you the best and worst deals. I don't want to be associated with Kramer. I would be associated with you in a heartbeat.
Yeah, well, they're not in consensus, right? You brought a lot of small cap companies, some much larger companies too. It's always interesting when the, whatever, like $50 billion, but like Italian or French or whatever company would want to do these same roadshows that the $50 million Canadian microcaps would do. So, okay, so Bison, so we launched it. I co-founded it in 2015 with a good friend who was running private banking at UBS for a number of oil and gas and other family offices here in Houston. I moved out to Houston for it. We've been investing in publicly traded oil and gas equities now for a decade. My co-founder left. He started phasing out in 2018, left in 2020. And what happened in 2020, late 2020, was that we had this large university endowment that had basically backed Bison and was our largest investor by far in a pari passu vehicle where sort of they controlled the money, but we had the discretion on the investment. So anyway, they pulled their money in November of 2020 and trying to figure out, hey, what am I going to do? One, I put more money into the investments personally. I sort of doubled down into the oil and gas sector. And two, I started to build a social media presence. And there's some stuff that you can't really do when you're managing full sort of institutional money that you can do when you're sort of managing your own money and family office money and sort of private client money. And so the culmination of that is this Bison Insights that we launched recently. Basically, we took everyone who was not a prospective client for Bison Interests, and anytime they signed up for our stuff, we put them on Substack, on what was Bison Interests and now Bison Insights Substack, and we basically kept giving them all our research that we were publishing to prospective clients and existing clients, and we did it for years. And so eventually, have 115,000 followers on Twitter, or X or whatever, of all this sort of stuff that we've done, which has been great for building a brand, really helpful in terms of getting great inbound ideas. And we basically took that, put it on Substack, and realized, hey, what we should do with this is put a paywall up, put more of an effort into putting even higher quality publications out via this thing, and then doing that is actually while sort of stopping almost all other public mentions of oil and gas companies. It was actually good for compliance from what we could tell and talking to different compliance folks and so on, as well as being good in terms of a revenue generator to essentially fund publishing even higher quality research on a more consistent basis and so on. So anyway, that's the background. So now I have two hats. I run Bison Interests, which is a oil and gas investment firm investing in primarily publicly traded small cap oil and gas companies. And I'm the author, the main author, with a lot of help from a fantastic analyst and sort of a team of folks, of this Bison Insights, which has come out with a bang. I mean, a couple of our ideas have done just extraordinarily well, and have a lot more to come. And so anyway, that's the.
Oh no!
Oh no! Did we lose him? Uh-oh.
His devices are not connected. We just
What
lost
does
it.
that mean?
Hang on. For our 299 visitors, let's wait while he gets reconnected here, because he was on a roll. I love Josh. This is absolutely.
Oh, here he comes. He's coming back. I love how you can see this happening in real time. Here he comes.
Yeah, it's always fun.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on. I think maybe I need a new computer. Use some of these subscription dollars for this.
We've got your audio, but not your video. I don't know.
No, we got him.
The video.
Yeah, we got you back. You're back 100%. Thank you very much. And Josh, thank you for your excitement. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Not only do you have great hairline, I love everything that the years that I've known you. This is absolutely, I've never been in such a news cycle, Josh. This is absolutely the craziest. This morning, I just wrote an article. Let's see. The title of it is Putin says oil prices could soar past $100 without Russian crude. Holy smokes, Batman. And, you take a look at the Siberian 2 pipeline that he has just negotiated with China, the 14% natural gas and LNG that EU relies on to stop their deindustrialization that they got going on right now is absolutely hilarious when you sit back and think that they could even lose all of that. Would you think we'd have $130 oil if Putin's removed from the market and he's laughing about it? Good grief.
Yeah, I'm just looking for my my 250 WTI hat. Here it is. Okay, so it's coming out. This hat will actually be an understatement. Here we go. That's always fun with the mirroring thing. This hat will be an understatement if Putin actually pulled his oil off. He is just exaggerating. There's no way. Russia can't afford to not sell oil to the broader market. But what Russia could afford to do is they're already producing less and selling less because of Ukraine's kinetic sanctions on Russia. And so what they could do really easily is they could pull a little oil off, and then their CPC pipe that an export facility they use to export Kazakh oil could magically go down for maintenance issues. And frankly, I mean, those would be not unexpected considering that Ukraine, I think, already bombed one aspect of that. And, Russia could arguably say, hey, force majeure, like we don't want this thing to get bombed, so we're going to turn it off for a while, which actually is probably the highest impact thing they could do because it would stop a little of their oil exports and a lot of Kazakh oil exports. And you would be back easily at 2022 high price levels almost immediately. Yeah. So the other thing that people are not thinking about that I think is worth talking about on that vein is OPEC has been bringing oil back on the market, right? And part of the deal has been similar to 2018 that the U.S. Trump has this sort of lie going on. Again, wonderful things the Trump administration is doing on deregulation and so on, but unfortunately, there's some stuff that's hard to get away from when you run sort of decades of scams and all kinds of weird New York real estate stuff. And so Trump has this tendency to make promises that he doesn't always follow through on fully. Again, I voted for the guy, but I still, whatever, like he just is who he is. He's on TV. You can see a decade of him on TV, an apprentice, and just whatever he is. He's Trump. So one thing he did in 2018 that he appears to be doing now is promising to cut off Iranian oil. And he promised to do it in 2018 and didn't, and crashed the oil price in late 2018. And then he enforced the sanctions. And it appears that's what's going on now too. We'll see. But my theory is that similar to then, there's a promise to the Saudis and their buddies that he will force Iranian and other oil off the market and that they should be adding to their supplies in exchange for that. And it appears that they fell for it again. And the prices have fallen a lot since Trump came into office. And I think there's only a number of months that the Saudis and others will be willing to continue to fall for this. And either they're going to go cut because the US is probably in a recession, at least a technical one. Jobs data has gone negative. Now the BLS has conveniently stopped reporting, similar to sort of some of Trump's antics with some of his businesses way back when. Magically, oh, sorry, our printer broke. The financials that you need in order to, not default on our XYZ business, whatever. You can't default because we're not printing. There's no financials. Similar idea. So anyway, I think that's what's going on. So I would watch what's going on with Iran very closely, and Israel and Gaza. Like there's a lot going on there to watch that could lead to much lower total oil supplies, even with OPEC bringing back on production. And OPEC doesn't make sense what they're doing if you don't think that they're going to have some sort of deal to get oil production cut off, maybe from Russia, but almost definitely from Iran. So that's the other big sort of aspect I think people are just giving up on that I would be looking for.
Josh and David, I want to open this up as an open discussion. And if you're one of our 460 listeners already piling in, the question is, does OPEC actually have spare capacity that they've been unloading their cuts? And is OPEC really capable of having that is a real question, Josh. I don't know how much extra capacity they have. Iraq just opened up their pipeline that has been sitting vacant for a long time that they can now export. And there's a lot of interaction between Iraq and Iran. Iran is wanting to open and connect one more pipeline to allow them to sneak past sanctions and get Iraq. There's some crazy stuff going on with the Dark Fleet and pipelines, and they're figuring all that out against sanctions.
Yeah.
Do you really think OPEC and OPEC Plus have spare capacity?
I want to hear David's take on this first, and then I'll go.
Well, I think there are a couple of countries in OPEC Plus that have spare capacity, or at least according to the data that is produced. I think Saudi Arabia still probably does have some. The UAE might, and Russia probably does, because Russia's been holding back volumes and having volumes forcibly held back by sanctions. But other than them, it's hard to know. I mean, I think it obviously, because OPEC Plus has only been actually producing less than half of their advertised production increases, there's real constraints within that cartel among most of the countries. But there are just a few of the heavy hitters that I think probably still do have at least some spare capacity. What do you think, Josh?
So I think that the one other dynamic with OPEC and OPEC Plus right now, I used to joke that these guys had a bone saw they were sharpening for me, and maybe this is going to restart that, or maybe not. We'll see. Even mentioning the bone saw, I think, is very sort of offsides among certain folks. I think that Russia is basically out to some extent of their spare capacity. If you look at the estimates people had in 2022, and you look at sort of what had happened to Russian supplies up until Ukraine starting to do their kinetic sanctions, Russia appeared to have already been limited in terms of their exports. And this is based on both the analysis, there was significant analysis done by many, many different highly credible consultants and engineering firms and various other stuff in 22. So you take that stuff and you ignore what they've said since then. They get paid to do all kinds of stuff. Ignore that. You just look at the base analysis that was done that was highly technical, where you saw estimates of 1 million barrels a day or more of capacity coming off from then until now. There were some that said 2 to 4. Those were wrong. But that million or so gets you down to about current Russian export levels before the impact of Ukrainian sanctions. So that would tell you that's one way I sort of figure that. Another way is that some of the ostensible independent experts who either openly or the rumor has it are affiliated with some of these OPEC countries or are funded by them or they're their biggest clients or whatever, have come out and publicly said that they think that Russia has no more spare capacity. And so a number of these different folks who are affiliated, either directly, openly, or indirectly, not sort of rumored, have indicated that they think that Russia's out, and that one reason for Saudi and UAE and Kuwait, who have invested a huge amount in their own spare capacity additions, would be raising production, is to get a reset of the calculated levels of quotas to then be able to, once they have that, they can kill potentially millions of barrels a day of claimed spare capacity and then go back to cutting. But instead of having this nonsensical narrative of 7 million barrels a day or whatever of spare, it would be a narrative of 2 or 2.5 or something.
Right.
So I'm not saying we're at 0, but prior to any additional additions or reversions of cuts this weekend or whatever, it looks like we might be at 2 or 2.5 million rather than 7. And so I think their goal that they've communicated indirectly is to sort of get to no spare capacity for a minute to show what's happening and then be able to go cut, but then not have that extra 5 get counted against them in the paper markets.
And don't you think where Russia's concerned, doesn't it also kind of depend on how you define the term spare capacity? Because they've had a lot of their infrastructure has been hit now in the war. They have refineries that are at least partially offline. And so that limits how much, they may have spare producing capacity behind those refineries, but the limitations now on the refining capacity and damaged pipelines limits how much they can put on the market. So, I mean, to me, it kind of also depends on how you even define that term. And that's going to be constantly changing as long as this war goes on.
Yeah, I think the way I think about it is that they already had lost about 1 million barrels a day just through natural declines and sort of lower quality field management and redirection of labor and capital to the war effort versus the oil production effort. And so those numbers for me were before the Ukrainian attacks. And so then it's just a question of, hey, I'm sympathetic to the arguments that Ukrainian attacks so far have had a limited physical impact because there was so much extra refining capacity and so much extra export capacity, partly because production was already down and exports were already down. So it's sort of easy to see, everyone would agree, I think, that there was extra capacity in the system in terms of empty pipe and in terms of not full utilization on the refineries. And so I think now it actually sort of weirdly, Ukraine sort of throws a wrench into the rest of OPEC Plus's plans, because if the goal was to show that Russia can't produce more but now Ukraine hit some Russian refineries, it's a little murkier and it doesn't really fully accomplish what they're hoping. And I think the risk to oil bulls in the short term is that that might mean that the OPEC plus folks keep production higher for longer in order to show the full impact and take away some of that question mark before they then go ahead and cut or not, depending on sort of what's going on. I do think they're likely to cut in the sense that I don't think they want to be fully supplying the market. I think they want to have some spare capacity, and the amount that they've spent to have that spare capacity is enormous. And so, I don't think they want to take their tens of billions or more of investment in spare capacity and waste it in order to just get an incremental few percent or something of supply on a sort of per country basis. So that's how I see it.
Well, David and Josh, let me ask this question, because the Chevron just had a fire in California this morning, or last night, and that brings up the disaster that Gavin Newsom has absolutely devastated California. California is a national emergency waiting to happen, a national security issue, because they import ballpark 70% of their oil. They've got another refinery fire going on. They've got 20% of their capacity coming off. Those are some of my biggest stories on energynewsbeat.co. Those things go nuts on California. And Gavin Newsom is very much like Mayorkas, a national security risk to the United States. How do you see, because they have to import California, whether they like it or not, is part of the international oil market since they import so much. Kern County, Gavin Newsom goes, I'm going to put my magic hands up and I'm going to pretend to allow you guys to drill Kern County only. That's not going to solve any problems. How do you feel about California?
David, you wanna?
Well, I mean, that was so to clarify, that was at the El Segundo refinery that Chevron operates. It's their only remaining refinery in California. It's the biggest refinery on the West Coast, 276,000 barrels per day of capacity. It supplies 40% of all the jet fuel to all military and civilian air operations on the West Coast. It's a highly critical bit of infrastructure that Chevron has said that it has no intention of closing, at least no current plans to close, despite the fact that the Phillips 66 and Valero refineries are being shut down over the coming year. So it's a critical piece of infrastructure. It sits directly adjacent to LAX airport and the Los Angeles port facility, right in between them. It's been there for decades. It's an aging piece of infrastructure. And to me, the big question here now is this incident, which is going to bring terrible PR for Chevron. What does that do to their internal discussions about whether or not to even keep trying to operate that refinery? And what does that mean for the national security interests of the United States if Chevron decides, hey, we don't want to operate this thing anymore? We'll try to sell it, but if we don't have any bidders, we're going to shut it down. I think this is a huge event that happened last night that we're going to see a lot of news about in the months to come because of the critical nature of its operations there to everyone on the West Coast. That's me.
Yeah. California is a mess. I'm a happy immigrant from California.
We have a new title to the podcast, John.
It'll get a lot of views, I guess, but everyone sort of knows it. So I don't know if that's such a surprise. It's like New York City being a mess, but then they're going to go vote for a socialist to be mayor anyway. I get flack for talking about this stuff. People are like, oh, stick to energy. It's like, this is energy. These guys are destroying demand. They're destroying their local economies. It's terrible. I mean, California is like the ultimate natural resources curse. The people of California are so lucky they're a part of the United States of America with limitations and constitutional boundaries, because otherwise, man, they'd basically just be Venezuela in terms of how they voted and the policies and so on. And so, there was actually another news item that came out yesterday where I think it was Schellenberger came out with this, where apparently there's $1 million a year per homeless person that gets siphoned into these NGOs and other sort of, actually my brother was associated with this, where he was running a set of detoxes and rehabs and so on. And he was too successful. And so he ended up getting sued and shut down by the state and insurance companies because his recovery rate was like 50%, when the recovery rate for these things is normally like 5%. He actually cared and wanted people out of his program.
We can't have that.
This was a huge problem because it was taking away from all the theft and the grift and all this other stuff in California. So anyway, I've seen this like very close in terms of just how big the mess is. So anyway, so back to direct energy questions. So yeah, I can't even imagine how expensive it's going to be to rebuild this refinery if it does get redone. Yeah. And so, there's real problems. I do think that Newsom has realized this, and, he's been highly effective where he's chosen to, in terms of pulling back some of the like socialist communist nonsense. Like if you remember a couple of years ago, they had the head of China, the dictator of China, come in to meet with Newsom in San Francisco. And in the 2 weeks leading up to it, they kicked all the homeless people out. They cleaned up the streets. They cut down on crime. And it turned out that they could actually fully control all these things that they claimed were systemic problems. And they blamed Trump. They blamed all these other things. And it turned out it was fully in their control. And they were just choosing not to do it. And so I think energy is going to be harder, but I think it's a similar idea where, right now they're choosing to start giving a lot more drilling permits. And I think energy is harder, but I do think that they're about to go play the nonsensical, oh, we're pro energy and we're good at policy because look, our drilling rig count went from 5 to 20. Which is very doable. I got asked by a Reuters editor who was brilliant, and she was asking me, hey, like, how does this happen if oil prices are down? And the answer is, well, if you go from like 80 rigs running to 5, there's a right number in there because of regulatory and tax. There's a right number in there, and it's probably not 5. And it doesn't have to do with oil. It just has the oil price. It has to do with, hey, what's the minimum number of rigs you need to run in order to sustain existing operations? And so I think they'll get that bump, and then they're going to go claim credit for it. And so, he's been good for Texas to some extent. I think he's going to be great for the responding to the LinkedIn comment. I think he's going to be great for these drilling rig operators and for some of the producers from here, this very, very low point. But there is, there are ramifications from running bad policies for a long time that you don't get to undo immediately. And I think this refinery fire explosion, which is tragic and terrible, I think the aftermath is going to be another sort of black eye for the Newsom administration in California. It's going to cost them way more. It's going to take them way longer. And like you said, there's a risk that Chevron walks. I will let them know if they're looking for someone to be the face of their refinery. I will happily assume operations subject to hundreds of millions of subsidies and regulatory waivers. Yeah. And
can I be your VP of operations? I'd be glad to do that.
I will do that.
I'll work with you as well. Hey, I got a question though for you, because Kern County, you bring up a great point, Josh, and that is his pretending to make this facade. I'm going to pretend to give drilling. They went from 3,000 permits a year to 12.
Yeah.
And in Kern County, they've made this push in order to get, and our great friend of the show, Mike Umbro, has been out there at the lead charge on this, and his friend George, they're out there trying to get this done. But if they get Kern County, which used to be a huge asset for oil and gas production in the United States, it won't even fill up that pipeline. They're within a few thousand barrels of shutting down the main artery to get to the refineries in California. I don't know that Kern County alone can keep that pipeline open. I'm trying to do the math. And I went to Oklahoma State, Josh. That's why you saw me bring you some good deals and some bad deals. I'm trying to do the math, and the math ain't mathing up, man. So anyway, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think if you can get, that's where the 20 number comes from. And I got some real pushback on that. People are like, oh, are they going to add any rigs? And the reality is, look, if you're already running rigs in California, you already have operations there, you're already subject to their ridiculous regulatory scrutiny and absurd tax structures and all kinds of nonsense. If you're already doing that, and that's where your assets are. So then you've already dealt with the big part of the headache. Then it's just a question of optimizing the wind down of your operations. And so if you're the CRC of the world, especially now that they're merging with Berry, you're going to go, if you can get more permits, you're going to go drill a bunch of wells. That it's not even really about growing your production. It's about slowing the decline, fixing some of your midstream facilities and gathering systems, rationalizing some of your overhead and some of your other costs. Yeah, maybe your production will grow from a very, very low point. It'll go from a historical, let's say for CRC, what is it, like 300,000 barrels a day on that total asset base over time, down to now, what is it, 70 or something thousand barrels a day. Maybe you bounce it up to 100. It's still way down from the high, but you get it to a point where you're able to maintain your gathering systems for another 10 years. You're able to maintain some of these pipelines and so on. Right. And so the total cost impact, the total cost savings impact and the push out of the asset retirement obligations are so significant that it makes it worth actually going and running some of these rigs, even at $60 or $65 WTI. So again, does this threaten the global story on oil? Absolutely not. It's not even close to moving the needle. Does it move the needle if you're one of the top 2 rig operators and you have a bunch of rigs ready to go? Absolutely, it's great. And then does it move the needle for some of these upstream guys who have suffered for so long to be able to maybe get some permits, and then who knows, maybe some subsidies? I mean, it's California. It's like red light, green light, right? Red light, they destroy you. Green light, they give you money, so I don't know. It seems like it's green light for the energy guys in California for now. And I don't like being a recipient of state aid or whatever, but hey, if I can invest in a business that's been 90% destroyed by the state from its ridiculous onerous stuff, and now is going to get, a 50% uplift from here, so still only 80% destroyed by the state, sure, I'll take it for now. And if it's a small, for me personally, and for funds I advise, I'd rather have that be a small portion of exposure and then have there be a lot of financial and operating leverage to that, than have it be a large exposure or go actually own some of these things. Other than if they'll give me the title for this refinery and then give me hundreds of millions of dollars of subsidies and tax credits and regulatory waivers and so on, that I will do happily. I'll come in, I'll become a California taxpayer again, I'll deal with the whole headache. I will take that refinery if Chevron doesn't want it, subject to those conditions. So just that is an offer, and California, if you're listening, whoever's listening, I'll take it, no problem. I don't think they'll take me up on it, but I would happily.
Dear Congress, you need to start working on the El Segundo Recovery Act of 2020. What is this? 25, yes. So we can take it over.
I'll set up a public company. I'll let the Trump Juniors and so on invest 10% of it. The government can have 10%, the federal government can have 10% of it too. We'll go get $2 billion of energy loans and whatever, and we'll give 10% to the federal government. The way these deals have worked, the Trump children and their associated funds get some. I don't exactly know how that's legal, but however that's done legally, they can have it legally, and I'll go run it.
Josh, all these years I've known you, this is why I love having you on my podcast. I'd give you a hug, but this has got to be a COVID man hug. Let's take a look at this question from Rodney. Rodney's a cool cat on LinkedIn. Josh, how motivated do you think oil and gas to debunking CO2 alarmism? Do you think they've got self-imposed barriers perceiving a drop in price if scarcity is reduced, or perhaps fear of buckling the ESG concern? Let me just throw this out there. I think ESG has done a outstanding job in one aspect in oil and gas. The governance side of ESG, 2 sides, the environmental and the governance side, the U.S. oil and gas companies have done an excellent job giving money back to their investors over the last 10 years, and they've done an outstanding job. ESG has been good for the oil and gas industry with the environmental, taking care of the environment. We're the best in the world, and the governance in giving money back. Investing in oil and gas, it seems like Wall Street suddenly woke up last Friday and said, maybe we got to invest in some oil and gas. And I'm like, wow, that's kind of cool. But anyway, I just want to throw that out there and want to get both, David, your thought on the CO2 and your thought on this, Josh, as well.
Well, it was for Josh. I'll let Josh go first.
Sure. So Stu, I think I disagree with you on this one. I think ESG has been terrible, both for, let's say, for the planet and for the country and for oil and gas. I think that what we've seen is the slow degradation and destruction of the wonderful legacy that Rockefeller left us with these oil majors. And I think we've seen the bureaucratization and the morass of sort of professional management nonsense through these giant organizations. And I think we've seen sort of this perversion of these organizations, and Rockefeller's just absolutely spinning in his grave. Sort of similar, frankly, to his descendants and foundations and so on, the stuff that they supported and that they support now versus sort of his values and what he supported. I mean, I went to University of Chicago. Rockefeller funded the University of Chicago to be a free-thinking organization, institution that would be sort of focused on the good and the right and the non-political, and just to find the life of the mind. And you look at the stuff that these guys support, and it's completely the opposite. So I think that's a good analog. Like, these organizations are essentially becoming like the state education institutions that push the wokeism and all kinds of weird sort of values, as well as like some of these Ivy League schools that have also been co-opting sort of on that direction. And why does that matter? Well, I guess it's good for oil and gas that you have the Exxons and Chevrons and whatever the world doing absolutely nonsensical, value-destroying garbage, and lobbying for that, and co-opting these lobbying groups and pushing that. So I guess that's good because it's pulled away some capital from upstream oil and gas, but really it's very bad in my assessment, because what I think these companies should be doing, and I've worked on a white paper on this, I should probably actually just do the full analysis and publish it, but I think what these guys should be doing is what Rockefeller did, which is focus on their operations, shut up, sit down, cut all their nonsense out, spin out their international operations, spin out all the other stuff, focus on being the very, very best integrated, fully integrated operators that they can be, not win through lobbying, not win through whatever nonsense, win by having low-cost assets where they have control of the minerals, and then control of the wellbores, and control of the pipes, and control of the refineries, and the chemical plants, and the gas stations, and just win by being low-cost, integrated operations like what Rockefeller did. People have the wrong lessons from Rockefeller, and these organizations could not be further from what was accomplished with Standard Oil. And I think that's where you get lost and into all this sort of weird, like, flavor of the moment. And yeah, like, did Exxon and Chevron do a better job of this than BP and Shell? Sure, yeah. But that's a very, very low bar. And when you look at the tens of billions of dollars that each of those organizations have written down from bad deals and nonsensical investments based on, the flavor of the day, and what they're still doing, like, come on, give me a break. That Exxon and Chevron need to fight with each other publicly over a non-operated interest offshore Guyana, where you have Venezuela ready to go invade potentially, and you have all these questions on corruption, and you have like a almost like communist-style ruling party in Guyana right now with 99% of the vote, and like just complete nonsense. What are they doing? Like, who cares? Focus on your enormous assets that you've spent giant amounts of money on, and get actual low costs of production. Stop lying about using like weird refinery byproducts as supposedly like the new age of completions. There's just all kinds of, they're so invested in their complete garbage. And honestly, I think it's to the point where it's impossible for them to back up and say, hey, we're just going to focus on being the low-cost integrated winner. And they're so focused on all this other nonsense. I think it's actually hard. I think they need new boards and new management teams. I was sort of sympathetic to the engine number one guys. I thought that it was the wrong direction they were suggesting. But you look up, you look at like a Porter's Five Forces, you look at some of the sort of basic business strategies, and they're neither the low-cost provider, nor are they sort of the highly specialized best or whatever. They're just sort of in this like strategic middle. And so these guys desperately need to fix their own stuff. And you can tell when people have a problem with their own stuff when they get involved in all kinds of other nonsense. And they really need to just go and they need to revitalize their refineries so they stop blowing up. This is timely considering up in California, but Chevron's problem isn't California, it's their Gulf Coast refineries and chemical plants that blow up and whatever, and not owning their infrastructure. Like, what are they doing This is not Rockefeller's vision. It's so far from it, and it's led to high operating costs and high development costs and just nonsense. Fire 80% of the people, hire the very, very best people, make them accountable at the business unit level, and be the best producer and the best transporter and the best refiner, fix the refineries so they stop blowing up and catching on fire every year. Anyway, that's my diatribe. But the ESG nonsense is, I think, a symptom of a very deep problem in these integrated oil companies. And I think they need to solve it. And if they don't solve it, they're terrible investments. Probably I should own puts on them as sort of a bet on, as a protection against any sort of future oil price crash, but also just on a bet that these very sort of sick organizations that are decrepit and sort of involved in all these value destroying things will underperform versus some other organizations that are owner operator, led and run, that are aligned with their shareholders and that actually are focused on high returns on invested capital rather than chasing sort of the flavor of the day. And again, people feel strongly about this stuff, but just when you study the tens of billions of dollars these guys lose at a time on deals, and when you look at their accounting, including the losses that they've incurred and booked, I mean, it's just astonishingly bad and totally inappropriate relative to what their mission is as fiduciaries for their shareholders. So anyway, that's, get off my soapbox, but that's my problem with those guys.
Josh, not only am I going to give you a hug, but I'm going to say that you agreed with me because I left out the social portion of that because I was about to go on the same tirade. So I'm going to back this up and then I'm going to play you again and I'm going to superimpose my face on you and do the same tirade.
Sounds great.
Great job, Josh. That was outstanding.
It really was.
Can we talk for a minute? Can we talk about how Imperial Oil has massively outperformed its peers? It's controlled by Exxon, and how they're laying off their Calgary office after these people have massively outperformed for them, and how just foul that is. I mean, I'm all for, business rationalization and cutting costs and aligning, performance with shareholders and with the organization. But when you do that, you should be rewarded for it. And the people involved with it should be rewarded for it, not fired and have their stuff shuffled off to some other geography and some other place. I don't know. To me, that was probably the real impetus for me doing all of that, getting on that soapbox. It's not just the ESG. It's also like the punishment of the best performing people. The Imperial Oil people who just got fired or getting laid off are probably the best performing business unit in the entirety of ExxonMobil across everything. And here they are getting punished for actually living up to Rockefeller's vision as they go, allocate capital, all kinds of nonsense and all kinds of other things.
It's because they're in Canada?
I think it's because they're making the Exxon people here in the US look terrible because they're doing such a good job. So of course we need to fire them and go, and again, look, like the very senior people in these organizations are very well known. They're always on CNBC, whatever, but who cares? They're not paying me. I don't own their stocks. And frankly, like I have a First Amendment right to say whatever. And they are really, I think it's just so foul to go fire those people. It's not capitalism. It's not socialism. It's just like crony nonsense to do that sort of thing. And I don't even know any of those people. I can't name a single person that I know right now at Imperial Oil who's getting laid off in Canada. And it's still wrong. No economic tie. And I think it's a symptom of a deep corruption and deep sort of move away from the base sort of idea of what we're supposed to be doing, which is, profit-oriented capitalism, shareholder-oriented capitalism. We saw it with Rockefeller, and I think that news, he's spinning in his grave, seeing the best people in his organization, getting fired, essentially punished for delivering the best results in the organization. And again, you don't need to even look at the accounting metrics. Just look at the share price performance for Imperial Oil over the last, let's say, 3 years, 5 years, and compare it to almost anyone. I mean, truly impressive and a truly sad day to see those people, instead of being feted and given, extra bonuses and extra responsibilities, seeing those people laid off is just truly reprehensible and clearly not capitalism. I don't know what it is. I don't know what's going on, but it's not good. And I think it's just this symptom of this much bigger problem with these large sort of government, almost affiliated organizations that are so focused on this ESG nonsense and all this other stuff. So anyway, that's I'll get off the soapbox again.
Stupid do you think they're going to be when Alberta becomes a 51st state and they've just sold off one of their best divisions? So just thought I'd ask that question if Alberta becomes a state. Since they're not voting.
I mean,
that would be something. Yeah, that would be really something. Can I want to address the first part of Rodney's question, though, real quick.
Oh, you bet.
Which is, how motivated do you think oil and gas are debunking CO2 alarmism? The quick answer to that is not at all. Okay. Not even a little bit. API, I mean, couldn't even be bothered to offer comments on the EPA's effort to rescind the stupid, idiotic, ungrounded endangerment finding on carbon dioxide, for crying out loud. And that's all at the behest of the major oil companies that make up its membership. So they're not focused on that at all. I saw this all developing in 2005, 2006, when I worked for Shell. It was in the early days of this ESG mania, and they were creating a whole department made up of people who believed all this stuff, right? They're all nice people, really smart people, who just were not focused on the core business whatsoever. And it's become an enormous operation inside of Shell, still is, and every one of these other big major oil companies. So they're not focused on debunking any of it at all, okay? And that's been a problem with the oil and gas industry since Rockefeller died, basically, is none of the executives, senior executives at the big companies want to invest their personal capital into defending the industry they're in. With a few exceptions. Chris Wright is obviously one of them. Nick DeUlius, you can go down and name a few. They're mainly at independent producers, smaller companies, or service companies. But at the big major oil companies and the ultra big independents, not a one, none of them. So I mean, that's just irrelevant. It's not part of their mindset. And there's all kinds of pressures they're under that make them operate in that fashion. And it's very unfortunate for the industry as a whole.
I just want to throw this out. My granddad was the chief geologist for Sinclair Oil when they discovered the North Slope. And he was attributed for discovering the North Slope, which Alaska has been now just starting a resurgence. But Sinclair threw his ideas out, and ExxonMobil bought all the rights, and Sinclair went almost distinct like the dinosaurs.
Yeah, so, I worked at Burlington Resources. We ended up inheriting what little was left of Sinclair and a lot of really good people from that operation in the 80s and 90s.
So anyway, I thought that was really, really good. We're having some more comments here from Peanut Butter PB. Methane leakage is a new weapon against the NGOs. The finance sector expects ESG standards to strengthen to include monitoring and capture. What are the key challenges? That's a big one, and I agree with Josh on this. NGOs need to go away, and I think that I'm hoping that we do shut them all down since they've lost USAID funding. I think that there was a lot of climate change nonsense funding, and I think the Trump week, much like Shark Week when he was at the UN last week, was too hilarious. That speech was great. I think we may see some changes there. I want to leave you guys to answer that one.
So, Chris Wright, I thought, was a really good advocate for oil and gas industry and climate while he was CEO of Liberty. But I have to say, I've been really disappointed by what's happened since he got into his position as the energy secretary. And, it's relevant to this last comment because there have been some very weird rules and very weird financings and very weird other things going on. You have the government going and funding a hard rock lithium mine, or I guess soft rock, but still just very weird stuff that should have not happened with someone competent. And then you had Chris Wright go and hang out.
I disagree with that. I don't agree with that at all. I think the military has lithium needs, and it's just part of their effort to reshore the supply chains for a key energy mineral. I mean, I think that move was totally justified.
It's a very high cost mechanism for producing lithium. And we actually have a lot of resource here that's already getting funded and already getting developed. And so again, it's this sort of weird problem where on the road to serfdom, there are some excuses for doing various sort of government involvement things in private industry. But for the most part, when you get the government in, you end up with these sort of weird alignments and weird incentives to do things that end up
Oh, I
being
totally agree with
destructive on a lot of mechanisms. But the big, actually, it's funny you do the thumbs up. My big problem with Chris Wright is that they come in, Trump has this drill baby drill sort of narrative, and then he goes to Saudi Arabia and stands by the first well that was funded by Americans. That was actually a dry hole, but it was the start of a big discovery. I think it was a dry hole. It was just the first well drilled. And he stands and gives a thumbs up. Those assets were nationalized by Saudi Arabia in the 70s. And yeah, they paid a tiny amount for it, but the estimate is that they paid 1/10,000th. That was the number I saw in an article. Maybe it's not exactly that, but directionally basically stolen. They did pay something, but 1/10,000th of the value today for Aramco. And maybe now that Aramco stock's fallen, it's 1/5,000th, but still, they basically stole our stuff. Yeah, it was on their land, but we invested in it. We had a contract with them and they stole it. And you have him giving a big thumbs up on that. I mean, just this whole perversion of America first in exchange for these sort of dubious, very short-term benefits from people who say they're our friends, but then take our stuff and don't stand up for us where relevant. I don't know. I think it's very sad and concerning. It's very bipartisan. It's been sort of this direction that we've gone down for a number of decades. And I thought that was very unfortunate. And that was the moment where I could tell that it was just all the nonsense that he had said for years that I agreed with was not indicative of who he was, because the Chris Wright who wrote all those things and said all those things is not the Chris Wright that would go and give a 2 thumbs up on this enormous, essentially national asset that American firms identified, developed, discovered, and then had taken for 1/10,000th of what it was worth. So again, just completely
but Josh, don't you think
Marxist?
Do you think there's any value that all happened half a century ago? That nationalization of those assets was literally half a century ago. Don't you think it's a little unfair to judge the current energy secretary in 2025 for not? I mean, what was he going to do? Say something nasty to the host for that? What was obviously a high priority meeting for the president, right? So I'm not sure it's really fair to judge him for that.
I completely disagree. I think that the things that we do now are indicative of our values now. And him endorsing the Saudis having taken this field 50 years ago is a question about now and priorities now, and signaling who we are and what our values are and what we stand for. And so I don't know that it matters so much when it happened. It matters if we are in favor or opposed to something. And I think that the theft of our resources, particularly of privately developed and discovered resources by our companies, which again is sort of the American concept. It's not this sort of fascist, state-owned, state-controlled, whether it's fascist or communist, but those are not American values. Those are foreign values. This was
well, let me ask you this then. So the president just had this state dinner with the King of England. The British burned down our Capitol building in 1812, which was 2 centuries ago. So, I mean, are we to condemn President Trump for doing the state dinner with the British King, who we sacrificed thousands of lives, American lives, for to gain our independence from a British king, and who burned down our Capitol building in 1812? So, I mean, what's the difference? These things, at some point, you have to deal with current realities, don't you? I mean, I just think it's unfair to condemn Chris Wright for that photo op. I just don't think
so. I think it's great,
really fair.
I think it's great to clarify this. So I think it's exactly that. This is a very important clarification, because I think what I'm saying could be misconstrued. I think if Trump took a picture in front of a picture of the White House being burned down in 1812, and it was a commemoration of that, and it was in the UK, right? And he went with the King of England, not the Prime Minister ever, but he went with the King of England and gave a 2 thumbs up by a picture of the White House being burned down at a memorial to that in the UK. I would also have a problem with that. So that I would have a problem with. Chris Wright meeting with the Saudis, I obviously have no problem with. That's very constructive. Chris Wright giving a thumbs up by the site of the expropriation of enormous privately held assets. Again, there's a huge difference between those two things. It's not the same thing
disagree
to
on
meet
that.
with
I don't
someone
wanna...
and to give 2 thumbs up on the thing that they did that was horrible for us. And so again, it's like America first versus America last. I think those are actually very important distinctions. Symbols matter, things matter, and there are distinctions. And so it's not the same to say.
I agree with both of you, and I am no longer a Republican. I'm an American first, and if you're not voting American first, get primaried. Let's take a look at this one. I don't know who this LinkedIn user is. Do you have a view on the hypothesis of U.S. data centers demand will be fed by gas and constrain LNG going to the Atlantic, or is there just so much extra gas demand will be absorbed? This is a great question, and I've seen some great information on Bison Interests. This fantastic Substack about different things out there, and we want to make sure that we get your advertising. We've got just a few more minutes here, guys. And Josh, can you give us your thought on AI and data center and LNG and natural gas?
Sure, it's a great question. Yeah, we put out some stuff. We had some various industry experts come on and do interviews on it too, to try to calibrate sort of my own view and my team's view with versus some other folks involved in planning and analysis and dealing with some of the hardest problems associated with this. So I love this question because this is sort of the optimistic demand case, which is, there's so many people who are pessimistic on gas demand. There's been this running gas bear thesis basically for the last decade, but really, let's say since 2021, it's been, I think Goldman came out with it publicly in 22, but they had been writing about it in 21, that there would be this massive glut in LNG supply, and that therefore it would crash the price and actually back up natural gas here in the US. This is the opposite of that. This is that demand is so high in the US for data centers that it would limit the supply. Excuse me. And honestly, I don't think either of those are right. So I think demand is going to grow here. It's going to grow a lot more than people think. I think supply will grow here on the natural gas side, maybe more than people think. I think we're going to get a wonderful price environment for natural gas. That's going to be probably in sort of the plus or minus $4.50 in MCF at Henry Hub, plus or minus 50 cents plus inflation. And so I think that's sort of my base expectation. I think it's phenomenal for many natural gas producers. It's great for the services companies because we're going to need a lot more gas rigs running in order to accomplish that. It's great for the pipeline guys. It's great for the LNG facilities because under most circumstances, these LNG facilities, despite what the CEO of Shell just said, saying, hey, they're not going to be economic, I think they end up being economic. I think we're in for a really nice, almost Goldilocks type scenario for natural gas here in the US. So I think the data center demand is good, but it's not going to be as big as it would take in order to pull back supply. I think the gas supply is going to be great at 450. You can drill a lot of stuff in the Mid-Con. You can drill a lot of stuff in the Appalachian area, in the Permian, and various other spots. And so I think it actually looks really good, but I'm not a doomer sort of on either side. On the gas side, I think there's going to be a lot of supply, and I think we'll just have a little higher price than people are thinking. What do you think, David?
Oh, I totally agree with all that. I think supply is the enormity of the resource is just so immense that, I hope we get up to 450 prices. I think that'd be good for everybody if we did. I just, the history in the past is that we get to that point and then we activate 20, 30 additional drilling rigs and drill the price right down to $2, $3. So maybe they'll avoid it this time, but it's the resource is so much more immense than the reserve estimates indicate. It's just incredible. So we're blessed with natural gas.
I want to give this one here. Chris Wright. Again, I've known Chris Wright for as long as I've known you, Josh. So I absolutely love him. He's, this was Liberty Energy's Bettering Humanities, and he really does have the heart for energy. And I just want to give him a shout out here. I love this comment. Give me Chris Wright, Energy Secretary in the UK, is Ed Miliband. Ed Miliband is actually like a Muppet, or is it Wallace and Gromit? Do you remember those?
Wallace and Gromit, yeah.
He is more like a Wallace and Gromit character. Ed Miliband single-handedly is destroying the UK.
Yeah, and Keir Starmer loves it.
You got to love that.
Yeah.
And then the two AI. Chris, we're winding down here. Not Chris, Josh, speaking of Chris, but we're winding down here. Tell people how people find you and how people can get in touch with you.
Sure. Yeah. So I have sort of these two hats. So I run this investment management company, Bison Interests. And if you go to bisoninterests.com, you can find out more about that. It's really relevant for sort of accredited and qualified investors. And again, none of this is meant as an offer, solicitation, or recommendation. But since you asked, that's where people can find that. And then we launched a Substack and a separate media company called Bison Insights. And so bisoninsights.info, or just Google Bison Insights and you can find it. And then one exciting thing to reference what David just mentioned in terms of the potential for another boom in gas production and bust in price, we're going to launch a little merch store. There's a few items that I have from way back when. And so we're going to start these offering these bumper stickers that say, "Dear God, give me another gas boom. I promise not to blow it again." So been looking for those everywhere. Wasn't able to find them. So we're going to start offering those along with the oil equivalent, a couple of, 250 WTI hats and some other stuff. And again, it's less about making the money. I don't know. I'll probably end up just donating that money to some, food bank or something here in Houston.
Yeah, probably cost you more to make them than you'll get from them. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Or maybe we'll overcharge for them and just donate the proceeds or whatever. But I think it'll be fun, and I think that is a concern, and we'll see. But I think for right now, that data center demand is big. And then someone left a comment, well, maybe we'll close on this. None of these data centers are getting run on solar and batteries.
No,
they're saying it, they're claiming it, just not happening, not even close to the reality. You listen to the recent comments from the CEOs and you listen to the folks that are building it, even the folks that supposedly are on the clean energy side or whatever, this Fermi IPO where they're like, oh yeah, we're going to do nuclear, but first we're going to go build multiple, gigawatts or whatever of gas power gen. So we're going to build that. But yeah, we promise in a decade, we're going to have some SMRs and some other stuff. We have the land for it. So, when they figure out that technology in 2045, we'll build it. So anyway, none of it, there's no evidence that nuclear is going to supply any of this stuff for a long time, unfortunately.
There's two things real quick. I keep having great comments in here. Melband isn't the technology illiterate. He's the Muppet. He's the beaker. How fun. That's great. I just wrote a couple articles on the gas turbine situation that we really need. And I've been interviewing AI data center guys that are installing all this stuff. And you take a look at the gas turbine, it is the supply chain issue. There's a 5-year wait, long-term wait out there, and that is an issue. But there are workarounds out there through microgrids and our great American technology, and all of it's going to kick in. You can take a jet engine, throw it out there, make some modifications, and then use those as backup. So I'm all in on getting those done. There's going to be a workaround for that.
That's what they're doing at the campus for Grok technology outside of Memphis, Tennessee.
And Stargate has
exactly
got jet engines that they're lining on out there. I just interviewed the guy doing that out there. So that was
and the manufacturers are ramping up their supplies. So there's 3 main turbine manufacturers for power gen, and at least one of them, I think it's GE Vernova, has increased their supply. I think it's going to be delivered for next year.
Too,
yeah, Mitsubishi's working on it, and then there's one other, and they're all either already ramping it, running extra assembly lines, or they're in the process of expanding them and they're about to. So I actually think we're going to end up with a glut of all this stuff, but it's going to use so much natural gas. And frankly, for the manufacturers, it's wonderful because they're getting multiple years of orders and so on. But we're in this amazing cycle. I don't know if it's a super cycle, probably not, but for natural gas demand and natural gas power gen, I mean, it's actually weirdly accelerating, and we haven't seen almost any of that impact right now. So I think that's where a lot of the skepticism around this really affecting price. But I think on the power gen, as well as on the LNG exports, where they're doing these modular facilities, both of those are giving the producers, the off-takers of gas, the ability to ramp at an accelerating pace. But the demand up until now has been growing linearly. And so I think when you get that acceleration, that's when you're going to start to see 450 gas. And I think we'll overshoot for periods, and then we'll have these things come off for periods where we'll undershoot. And that's where I think we're going to get that the bulls for gas, the super bulls may be very disappointed, but the bulls thinking the price is going to get a little higher than the forward curve. I think, David, that's where you'll be positively surprised.
That'd be fantastic for everybody. It
You
really
bet.
would.
And I've been tracking the oil rigs, and you can see that the oil rigs are coming down, but the natural gas rigs are flat. I mean, they are just constantly working and working through the system. So it just also depends on the different kinds of plays. We bring this last question up to you two. How long do you think the Schumer shutdown will stay on? I wanted to get, I love the memes going around. I'm sorry. I think this is one of the funniest things on the planet. I had to get in here. I was going to have a sombrero, but Josh, how long do you think the Schumer shutdown is going to, how long do you think the Schumer shutdown is going to be?
So I've read different things about it. One thing that was exciting. So there are folks who are critical to the functioning of the United States of America who may not be getting paid right now. So to those people, I express my sincerest sympathies, and I hope that they get paid soon. So that's not okay. There is an upside from this, which is maybe I've read, and I don't know how true this is not my area of expertise, but I've read that if this goes on for more than 60 days, it could be the impetus to go fire a bunch of the folks who are not those critical workers and who the administration's had trouble firing up until now through Doge or whatever. To the extent that we can go fire the sort of middle management layer and a bunch of these folks that are not so productive, similar to what I was saying about Exxon and Chevron and so on, I think bureaucratic creep is one of the biggest risks of, ultimately of fiscal issues and, mismanagement and poor governance. And so if we can really cut a bunch of that sort of bloat, and again, while maintaining the people who do critical, I'm not a anarchist. The government has an important role in our lives and in society. Those people need to be paid and need to be kept on. Unfortunately, we have a lot of other folks who are not that, and it would be wonderful if in 61 days those people get fired. Actually, which tells me that probably this goes 45 days and then the Democrats freak out, get worried about those people who are their donors and their voters losing their jobs, and they'll end up caving. But that's my bet, probably 45 days. What do you guys think?
45 days. David, how about you?
Next Tuesday.
I'm more with David because there are social programs that end in 10 days and the Democrats rely on those social voters. So I'm guessing that we only need about 4 or 5 of them. And I did not have on my bingo card actually Fetterman showing up as being the stable
voice of reason.
Democrat Party. Holy smokes, Batman. That man is absolutely hilarious. In my day job, I evaluate oil and gas deals. Is this well worth drilling? Is this one worth drilling? Bring me your deals. I almost want to be, bring out that Monty Python, bring out your dead, bring me your deals. Cause I think oil and gas, I love oil and gas deals. Bring me your deals. I want to evaluate them and then get them to people like Josh.
I just want El Segundo to go to Josh. That's what I want.
Me too.
You and I will be working for Josh.
Let's do it. We can set up a JV. It'll be fantastic. Unfortunately, anyone listening, that's probably not happening. What's probably happen is some other group that's politically connected to Newsom will probably take it over. They'll pocket a lot of the money. It'll take forever. It'll cost a lot more. The California voters will suffer. California drivers will suffer. But don't worry. Taxes and electricity prices will rise also. So anyone that's bought an electric vehicle in California will also suffer along with the ICE drivers in California.
I do want to give Steve Hilton a shout out. I just interviewed him, and Steve Hilton, if you're listening, please win the governor race. He has a plan for oil and gas in California. It's shout out to Steve. Got a shout out for General Flynn. I'm talking to him next week. So anyway, got to throw out some advertisements here. So we're going to have.
You got 2,000 live viewers right now. Is there anything else that we should talk about? Should we keep going for about 5 minutes?
Sure.
Absolutely. What do you got? I'll tell you what, Josh, when you at Intercom, I loved Intercom. I love all the folks there. And we had so much fun talking about investors, and I loved interviewing the CEOs and bringing them through that whole process and everything else. I tell you what, it is critical to think for the economy. Chris Wright and Donald Trump and Doug Burgum and Lee Zeldin, the three apocalypse, the three horsemen of the energy dominance apocalypse is what I call those guys. Let me say that again. The three horsemen of the energy dominance apocalypse are Lee Zeldin, Doug Burgum, and Chris Wright. And I absolutely think that they're the right men to get it done. I do, however, think that President Trump is lacking in the foreign diplomacy department trying to end the Russian war. I'm looking forward to visiting with General Flynn on that one. So I think we could do better in that one group.
Hey, I've got a question for Josh. Do you get Semaphore? Do you read their site?
I'm not a subscriber, but I do read some of their stuff.
They had a piece this morning that I thought was fairly well reasoned, that there may be a bubble developing among nuclear energy developers, startups, and developers with their stock valuations being overvalued. I wonder if you have a view on that. Do you look at nuclear stocks?
So one of the things I do in my day job in running this asset management firm is I try to find very asymmetric bets, and with a very small amount of the capital that I manage, I try to put on asymmetric bets in addition to trying to find value priced, well-run, great longer-term oriented oil and gas equity investments. And so I try to basically find 2 or 3 kinds of leverage and then buy premium via call options to be able to get exposure to essentially right tail events. And I can't say I've traded this very well, because typically I'll get these exposures and then I'll sell them after a double, and then I'll sell the rest after a 5x. And then some of them you lose money on. And in the end, it's been very good. And again, none of this past performance is not indicative. I'm not soliciting, whatever. But the reason to share that is, so I've had a lot of uranium exposure, which has been fantastic, because I owned these calls, particularly on URA, that were way out of the money. And when this SMR and Oklo bubble kicked off, and I have dim views on both of those particular companies because neither of them have actually done anything, and they have no revenue, and they have beautiful PowerPoint presentations. And again, I don't own them, and I'm not short them, and I've made a lot of money from them. So thank you for the great stock promotion. I've never owned the individual securities, and I have no plans to. They pushed the price of URA is actually the thing I liked least about the URA ETF, is that they owned so much of these sort of nonsensical, zero revenue, non-uranium miners that had these sort of hope and a dream type things. They pushed the price way up. So it was very, very profitable for me, thankfully, in this very, very small position, which ended up, I don't know if it really moved the needle overall, but it was a good bet. But so I've gotten to see the movements of this stuff, as well as try to evaluate the intrinsic value. And I think this is part of my critique on Chris Wright and how the Trump administration has sort of done this government intervention into private businesses. It's really pushed valuations of companies that I don't think would have gotten those sorts of valuations purely in the private market. It's pushed up valuations of companies that I think for the most part would just never have gotten that sort of valuation or traction. And in the end, in most cases, when companies trade to way higher levels than they should, they end up eventually trading down a lot. And there are many people who end up getting hurt by buying at peak enthusiasm and peak hype. So anyone that has exposure, again, maybe they go up more. Please don't rely on this. Who knows? Talk to your own financial advisor. But what I found over the 10 plus years of running Bison Interests is that in the end, valuation matters. I mean, the sector is down 70% or so since I launched in 2015. We're up a lot, which is great, through value-oriented, careful investing. Not everything I do does well all the time, whatever, lots of risk and uncertainty, but we've done well over a 10+ year period, partly by avoiding situations like this. And so I see a huge amount of risk, a huge amount of uncertainty, and so many things that need to go right for the, an Okla or SMR or whatever to actually work. And it's really sad because SMRs are a great idea and we should have them, but I don't know that these are the people to do it. And I'm pretty sure that the valuations for these companies are way out of whack versus what's actually. So anyway, I guess the short answer is I completely agree with that semaphore analysis. I've actually made money on this unintentionally, and I no longer have any exposure that I can tell. And I would emphasize a high amount of caution. It sounds like similar to what semaphore is saying. So completely agree. What do you think?
Well, I agree too. I mean, it seemed to make a lot of sense to me, but hearing what you say about it, then it makes even more sense. So I appreciate that. The other question is, the Dow just rocketed up over 47,000 today. We've been told that a government shutdown is going to be ruinous for the stock market. What in your view is driving the Dow and the other markets to be so much higher? I believe that's an all-time high for the Dow, by the way. What's driving this boom in the market today?
So I think broadly stock markets are hard to fully understand. I can guess, but again, I don't know that anyone really knows. So one, there was a fund that pitched me many years ago. I worked for this multi-billion-dollar family office. I met with, 200 funds or something while I was there for a few years. And one of them I loved. I don't know if we allocated, but it was a great idea. Basically, they owned stocks when Congress was not in session, and they shorted stocks when Congress was in session. And the back test on this strategy is amazing. I don't know how it did. I didn't follow it. I loved the idea. And so, again, there are critical functions in the federal government that should be funded and should continue. And I don't think that it's good for either party to risk that via nonsensical budget stuff. So I think it's inappropriate and whatever, but generally I think these guys were right. And I don't know if it really works like that day to day, but I do think that over time, unfortunately, given the enormous amount of bureaucracy and the enormous amount of waste associated with what's going on in the federal government and state governments and so on, I think we'd be better off with dramatic cuts to these various government programs. And so, hey, a shutdown could end up actually being really bullish. That's actually, maybe you guys are right and I'm wrong. If the stock market goes up for the next few days, I think Democrats might get worried and just,
Yeah, right. Well, we want to stop. Yeah.
And I think it's worth saying where the dispute appears to be. There's different ways that people are saying this, but the best I can tell, the dispute is around federal funding of medical care for illegal immigrants in about a dozen, mostly Democrat-run states. So that's the best I can tell.
Yeah.
What offends me the most right now is why California has made so much money off of Medicaid because they put illegals in there, and then they turn around and get the funding from the federal government that nobody's talking about. And we are now about to break over, please, 1 or 2 more viewers, and we will have 2,000. We hit 2,000 live viewers. We now just outdid CNN for the whole month. This is absolutely outstanding.
Maybe the whole year. I don't know. They're recorded.
Yeah, and look at this. And this is only this is because of the Schumer
shutdown. Thank you, Chuck.
Outdone CNN.
Yeah. The caption on that, by the way, was Chuck Schumer is ending his congressional career serving as AOC's intern.
Honestly, the racial aspect of that particular thing bothers me a little. The rest of it is hilarious, right? I feel like it should be him with the sombrero with like another random white guy who hates himself and hates the world and whatever. Like, I don't think that needs AOC. I think it's just the nonsense around what they're doing. It's almost like the confusion that David and I have around Chris Wright generally versus Chris Wright at Saudi oil wells that were stolen from America with him with 2 thumbs up. I feel like you can sort of miss the forest for the trees sometimes. So
you notice, Josh, out of respect for you, because I really want you back on the podcast. I did not play any of those videos because I didn't want to get a shutdown cut off, or anything else, because the censors will get you,
Yes,
on
they
our
will.
and stuff. So, but
well, while we have 2,000 people here, this is a good time to say everyone needs to go to Josh's Substack and subscribe. Okay.
yes,
Give us
absolutely.
the address.
Sure.
Bison
bisoninsights.info.
Bisoninsights.info, folks. And if you're feeling incredibly generous, you can also go to Stu's Substack, which is
the energynewsbeat.substack.com or energynewsbeat.co. We get an average of 100,000 people to 200,000 people a day on the site, depending on the day. So it is kind of fun being where I drive Google nuts, and they try to shut me down, but I keep popping up like whack-a-mole. And David, how do people find you?
I'm at the newly rebranded Energy Editions Substack. It's blackmon.substack.com. My feature article today is about the donut of prosperity being promoted by both the journal Nature and the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. It's a lot of fun. Really, really a joyful topic.
So with that, thank you, Josh. And again, I got to give you the old man hug, COVID hug, because I really appreciate you and all of your knowledge, because I am a stalker. I mean, a fan. I follow everything that you do. And so with that, David Blackmon, I appreciate you as well. So for all of our great listeners today, thank you all very much. And we will see you guys next time. Talk to you all soon.
Thanks a lot.
Bye, y'all. Whoops, Stu left.
Okay, I guess that means we should leave. Thank you.
Well, we haven't ended the stream. Here we go.